choice. Less.
My wife's the same way.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
they knew. They knew.
They knew. They knew.
They knew what we were. Okay, hold on one second. We are going to record on the cloud. I am recording here. How many of these are you doing today?
Oh, too many. Hold on. I want you to wave. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Well, I'm doing from like right now. You're the first one, straight until 2:30, and then I'm going to run around and do some more things in Nashville, and then I've got some more right like 4 o'clock, 4 to 6. So a lot.
A bunch. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, it's good.
This is going to be good. All right. Y'all set? You're rolling, you're rolling, you're rolling. Clap for sync. Here we go. In 3, 2. I have been wanting to talk to this guy for so long, and it took a pandemic and a book release to make it happen, but here we are. Carlos Whittaker, my friend, how are you?
Here we are, Kelly. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I'm a little bummed that it's pandemic, so I can't see you face to face, like in the same room, but I'm honored that you would want to hang out with me for a few minutes.
Of course. Okay. First of all, I got to give backstory. So I know we have a lot of mutual friends. You have been in Nashville for a long time, written several very popular books, speaking tour, but truly, I found you because I was watching like your vacation videos on Instagram. So I think a lot of people come to you from different areas. Where do you get most of the people that are like finding you and reading your books now? Where are they coming from?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the majority of people that follow me and, kind of my Instagram really, because Instagram is really where I hang out. Like I Twitter, but only when I'm angry. I go to Facebook when I just want to argue with family, but Instagram is like the happy place, right? And so most people on Instagram are coming. I think they're just coming because I like to kind of deal hope on a daily basis, just about the mundane things in life. Like it doesn't have to be, all these epic adventures every day. So like it could be from fixing my lawnmower to taking you on an African safari. I like to tell people the story of my life on a daily basis. And I think I do it in a way that make people feel like they're a part of my family. And that's where most of the people come from, that end up hanging out with me. And it's the blast. It's what I love to do. So again, from the tiny little things to the big things, I'm always trying to deal hope on a daily basis.
All right. So one way that you just did that, you've got this neighbor living across the street from you. And
I do.
This to me gave me chills watching this video. You've lived across from this man for years. You guys really haven't had a conversation, relationship, or anything. And you see him walk out and do something that really sparks you. I want you to tell us the story in your own words.
Absolutely. So I live in this great neighborhood called Creve Hall in Nashville, Tennessee. Obviously I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. We're talking to Nashville, we're talking to Kelly. But so my neighbor, I've become friends with all my neighbors, but there's this one neighbor across the street. He's probably an old white man in his 70s. And he has this American flag hanging on his front door. And I'm setting the scene for you so you just kind of know kind of what I'm building here. And he's got these 2 white bunnies in his front yard. And Kelly, for years, I've been trying to talk to this man. I mean, it's awkward. Like I'm 10 feet away from him. I'm like, good morning. And he just won't look at me. He's still mows his grass. I'm like, this man does not like me. So I began to build a story and a narrative and a bias in my own brain as to why he didn't like me. I'm a black man in this old white neighborhood. Everyone else is nice to me. Grumpy old white man isn't. He must not like me because of the way I look. That's what I built in my head. Well, just like you said the other day, after 4 years of never saying a word to him, homeboy comes walking out of his front door with a can of paint and a brush, kneels down in front of the 2 white bunnies, and proceeds to paint one of the bunnies black. He paints the bunny black, and I'm like, am I really seeing what I'm seeing right now? And I started to think, there's no way, because, okay, again, this is in the middle of, like, these protests and all kind of racial injustice happening in America. There's no way that this racist white man across the street that doesn't like me because I'm black is painting his bunny black, is what I'm thinking in my head. Well, sure enough, I walk across the street the next day to ask him why he painted the bunny black. It was the first conversation I've ever had. I recorded it because I wanted to show my wife. I told her, I said, hey, I'm going to record this conversation so you can hear it. And I asked my neighbor, why did you paint the bunny black? And he, first of all, when I walk across the street, he smiles, he shakes my hand. He's the nicest guy ever. I feel horrible for judging him for so long. And I'm like, what, can you not, maybe he like couldn't see or whatever. But he goes on to tell me that, he said, hey, listen, I'm an old man. I can't go down to these protests, but this is a way for me very softly to tell people in our neighborhood that Black Lives Matter. And he said, I decided to paint the big bunny black instead of the small bunny because George Floyd was 6'6". And when I was growing up in the 50s in Nashville, we had a servant in our home. She was a black lady. She taught me to read, to write, and it's been fun to watch that story take off. And hopefully people can watch the video, watch the story, and realize that this is what it's going to take, I think, to get our country back together.
Well, and you know what? Here's the thing. When you posted that video and then all of a sudden it catches wildfire and people are spreading it and sharing it and it's viral, fast forward to now you have this book out. This book, when you wrote Enter Wild, I mean, where did you, last year when you were writing this, when was the final, here's my final edit that you sent in? It was before any of this happened.
I turned it in the second week of October last year.
So there's no way in anybody's wildest dreams we could have imagined that this is where we would be. But what's being said in this book speaks to what we are living through right now. What's the biggest takeaway if somebody's going out and they're going to buy this or get the Kindle version or whatever? What is your big takeaway that you want people to say, this book, it nailed it?
Yeah, well, so here's, again, you're right. I didn't know it was going to come out during the wildest season of our entire lives, I can safely say everyone understands that. And here it is. It's dropping right now. And all it is, honestly, it's a call for people to leave. If they're still kind of sitting in the safe, comfortable, mundane, ordinary life, that we no longer have the option to remain safe. We no longer have the option to remain wild. We can actually go from mild to wild and be the hands and feet of Jesus and actually put action behind our conviction. I feel like for far too long, people have been very convicted about things like, oh, I believe that racism is bad. Oh, I believe that this is bad. But now we don't have the option to just hang out there anymore. Now you have to put action behind your conviction. So what I do in the book is I give 3 simple steps that I believe, honestly, people of faith or people that are not of faith can still take these principles, apply them to their lives, and to rest, which means lowering the volume of life so that the volume that needs to go up goes up. Enter war, which means once you lower the volume of life, you can see what's important and what you've got to deal with. And then once you deal with those things, you enter wild and you enter into this version of life that is really life to the full, life with abundance, the life that I feel every single human being on planet Earth was created to live. And even in the midst of the most traumatizing, disastrous season of many of our lives, I believe we can still live an abundant life.
Oh, I love this. I love what you're saying with this. Okay, So I want to touch on what you're doing right now with Instagram and what you're doing with social media. You have been very open and saying, we're going to do a Q&A. So put your questions here. And there are no dumb questions, except for the really dumb ones. But there are no dumb questions. So when people are coming at you, the questions that you're answering on Instagram are some of the toughest that I think people are having those discussions in their living rooms, or maybe they're just having them internally and they don't know how to vocalize them or where to take them. And you have become like the sounding board. One of those things is with Black Lives Matter. A lot of people are saying, I want to support Black Lives Matter. I love the idea of it, but I don't believe in defunding the police. And so they're in this weird, they feel like one has to overlap the other. How are you answering that question?
Yeah, I am. I'm trying every day to be that safe space for people to come and ask questions. And that in particular question is a big one. I've got so many close friends and family that are law enforcement officers or spouses of law enforcement officers. But then I have myself that lives in a constant state of, honestly, worried every single time I get pulled over. And so there is this space. And this is what I tell people is, listen, you can 100% believe that Black Lives Matter. And I hope that you believe that Black Lives Matter without at the same time believing that we need to defund the police. You can 100% believe that we need to defund the police and believe that Black Lives Matter. These things aren't mutually exclusive. They're not like together, bound at the hip. And so what I'm trying to tell people is the most important thing that the Black Lives Matter movement is talking about right now, the most important thing is that Black Lives Matter. And so since that's the most important thing, I think you can agree with that facet of what the organization is, but you don't have to agree with the organization in order to agree with the statement. And so I just want people to know it's okay to say Black Lives Matter. I get it if you want to say all lives matter, but right now it's the Black lives that are on fire. And so again, if a fire truck comes down my street because my house is on fire, but starts spraying the water hose on every single other house on my street, I'm going to be like, no, it's my house right now. So that's all we're saying. We know all lives matter, but right now we want to focus on Black lives. And then guess what? I think we're going to need to focus on Native American lives. I think we're going to need to focus on a lot of other lives that need to be focused and need to be lifted up in the conversation here in America. So you can say Black Lives Matter, but you can also not necessarily believe that we've got to defund the police or all the other things that that organization consists of. And one last thing, I tell people all the time, listen, the 2020 election is coming in November. I know that the candidate, that whoever we choose to vote for when it comes time for our election, that we are going to believe with some of what they believe in, but not all of what they believe in. And so the same way that we're going to have to get behind a candidate, okay, Republican or Democrat, whatever it may be, and say, you know what, I don't believe with everything, but I believe in some of it, is the same way we can get behind, we believe that Black Lives Matter, but we don't necessarily believe with everything that they're saying. So I think it's the same thing.
Another question that I've seen come up, because yes, I'm looking at your Instagram every day. Another question that I've seen come up that is hard to answer is, how do you address bias versus racism? And what is the fundamental difference? And how do you talk to people about what you perceive as a bias versus racism?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say a bias, every single person on planet Earth has racial bias inside of them. So what we have to do is we have to admit that, and then we have to search it out. When I saw my neighbor with an American flag on his front door, that he's 73 years old and he was grumpy and never talked to me, my racial bias came in to play. Old white man in the South, and let me tell you, all of our racial biases are based on experiences that we've had in our lives. So I'll tell you, Kelly, and I stated this on my Instagram last week, when people were like, I don't understand why an American flag would make you think that he didn't like you. Well, let me tell you where the bias plays in. Every single time, and it's been 5 times, unfortunately, in Nashville, Tennessee, that I've been called the N-word at gas stations, all 5 of those people had an American flag attached to their vehicle in some way, shape, or form. So unfortunately, it was weaponized against me. Does that mean that the American flag is bad? No, I love the American flag. My father was a first-generation immigrant into the greatest country on the planet. I love America. But the bias was built upon the narrative that has happened in my life. All of us have bias. So we have to admit that first. Racism, on the other hand, is when a racist is somebody that promotes or believes a racist ideology or policy and supports it through their action or inaction. And so, quite simply, it's somebody that is lifting up a racist policy or a racist idea by either saying something and actively doing it, or, and this is a big difference, not saying something to tear it down. And I think that's the part where a lot of people are like, oh, shoot, so my silence is implicitly pushing me towards this racist tendency. Yeah, listen, if there's things around you that you see are racist and you're not saying anything about it, well, that's going to lump you into that racist category. So it's no longer enough just to be not racist, right? That's why racist and anti-racist have to be the two conversations definitions. If a racist is somebody that supports a policy or an idea through their action or inaction, that is racist. An anti-racist is somebody that supports an anti-racist idea or policy through their action. And so that's where I would love for people to start to define racism as an anti-racism as, and then bias is kind of the step before racism. So we all have a bias inside of us. We've got to kind of shake that out. I think that most people in America have problems with racial bias, not with racism. I think, I'll be honest, I like to look in the good in people, and I think most people I see aren't racist. I think that they've got a strong racial bias. But racial bias, again, it can still be detrimental to another human being. So we got to check that.
This has been unfortunately like the perfect storm. I mean, we look at, here we are under a pandemic. We have all been quarantined at home. Hold on a second. Your graphic went away.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I worked hard on this graphic. We're going to wait for it.
That's right. No,
Thank you.
There it is.
There it is. Look at that. It's good, right? Okay.
Boom.
So this really has been the perfect storm. We are under a pandemic. People have been quarantined in their house. All of a sudden, the world has completely turned upside down, and now we are facing some of the ugly truths that we've not faced in a very long time. How do you help people who already have anxiety? What are some of the things that you are saying to them? Because this is, I mean, if we were putting anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10, we are at a solid 12 right now, Carlos. How do we how do we step that back, and how do you help people that really are feeling anxious, not only about their daily lives, but what's to come?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to blame anything, but we can start blaming some things, right? Let's be honest. We were not created to consume the amount of content that we're consuming. There's no way in the world that we were. And listen, this is pot calling kettle black here. And I know that what we've got to do is really the first section of my book, Enter Rest. We have to lower the volume of life. You have to be intentional with aspects and attributes on a daily basis that you're doing on purpose to remove the constant source of content that's coming to your brain. There's a study that shows that the amount of content that we consume on a daily basis was the amount of content that a human being in the 1700s would consume in a lifetime. Okay, that is mind-blowing. This is a Harvard study that was shown. So people wonder why, there's anxiety, anxiety epidemics, that are happening in America right now and around the world. I honestly believe we're plugged in. It's just too much, and so we've got to intentionally lower the volume of life. I think that's going to help. And then also, I think how we speak is very important. One of the things I talk about in the Enter War section of my book is to really change the language that we use. I think a lot of times we place things on our own shoulders that we are not intending to place. We say things like, and this is what I used to say all the time, is like, I have anxiety, I have depression, all these things. And so what I'm doing, and secular psychologists or faith-based psychologists would all agree with this. We're making agreements and placing things on our shoulders through the words that we say out loud that we're maybe not intending to put on our shoulders. So instead, we have to start changing our language. Instead of saying I have anxiety, I may say I'm going through a season of anxiety. Because what that's saying is that there's a beginning point, but it's also saying that there's an ending point. And I also love to say, pray the promise, not the pain. Everybody prays in some way, shape, or form. And when you're praying, don't start praying all the problems. Oh, God, I'm so anxious. Oh, God, I'm so depressed. Oh, God, I'm so overwhelmed. I mean, that's fine to pray every once in a while. But instead, why don't you find a promise that is promised to you? And I go to the Bible. And in the Bible, for me, I'm promised I'm promised that there's going to be a peace that passes all understanding that's going to be in front of me. So I'm going to actually claim that, say that out loud, instead of praying the pain. And so when I study how Jesus prayed, he actually never prayed the problem, which is kind of mind-blowing to me when I look at how he prayed. So then I think, well, I'm going to pray like Jesus did, because he seemed to have this thing figured out. And when we pray like Jesus did, we don't pray the problem, we pray the promise. And I think that's going to help lessen the anxiety and the overwhelming nature of where we currently find ourselves.
I know that you didn't sign up to be the social media guru that people are tuning into, but here we are. So how do you feel about that? Because, I saw that you were just saying, okay, well, I'm quote, unemployed, because you're a speaker. And it's not like you're speaking. Right. There's nobody gathering.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It is interesting to see that even in the midst of you telling so many things that, here's a way to work through this. You're preaching to your own choir at this point, because these words are being echoed back to what you're living through.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is so true. I think that I find myself in this season on social media where I'm having to live out the exact words that I wrote in this book. Like, I didn't know I was writing the book for me, but I actually wrote the book for me before my entire life was going to fall apart. Here I find myself in this pandemic, in the middle of racial injustice that's happening in America. You know, I've got a daughter that's still not 100% healed from her time in the hospital after that came out. And so I'm in the thick of it, you know? And so I think that anybody that has been trying to get to like 100%, you know, I tell people all the time, Kelly, that when you're like in the depths of despair, like living at 0% or maybe 0.1%, and you finally get to 60% better, I think what most people have the tendency of doing is 60% feels so much better than 0%. We get comfortable at 60%. We're like, you know what? This is good. And I'm here to tell you and shout from the rooftops, you don't have to stop at 60%. Like, you can get all the way to 100. Like, we're not promised life to 60%. We're promised life to the full. And I still think in the middle of trauma, in the middle of tragedy, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of maybe the most crushing anxiety you've ever had, that this message of Enter Wild can help you and propel you towards a life, the life that you were truly meant to live. And I think that it can happen right now in the middle of this season.
Okay, this is an unfair question, because if I would have asked you this 6 months ago, there is no way you would have predicted where we are now. But
yeah,
what do you think is going to happen in our future? Where do you see this playing out? Seeing what's happening now that's never happened in the United States, we are watching people's hearts turn. We are watching, you know, people step forward and say things they've never said before. Where do you think this is going to lead us in the next years?
I think it's going to make people a lot more uncomfortable before we start getting comfortable again. I'm not necessarily saying that it's going to get worse before it gets better, but maybe I am a little bit. I feel like we're at a tipping point. I feel like I'm seeing more and more people that would never have been comfortable speaking into the issues that we're dealing with right now, speaking into them. And so I say this, that I honestly believe I see such a beautiful future, but I feel like we're going to have to wrestle with some of the ugliness that maybe we haven't realized as we peeled the lid back on America and we look down and we go, wait a second, where's my beautiful USA song that I've been singing my whole life? Like, it doesn't look like it when I look inside of it. And again, we're still such a young country. We're babies. Like, we really are. We're like infants when it comes to being countries. And so I believe that there's a beautiful endpoint for what it's going to look like. It just may take a few years for us to start wrestling through some of the things that we've got to wrestle through. You know, we live in the South. I live in the South. There's things that we've got to wrestle with in the South that people in California aren't going to have to wrestle with. And so the wrestling is going to be tough, but I think that once we maybe remove our hearts from some of the things that we placed all of our identity, so many people's identity has been placed on things that they're looking now and go, I don't know if like my identity should be placed on that. And so I think what's going to happen is it's going to be rough before it gets better. But I honestly believe it's not only going to get better, it's going to look exactly like what I think our founding fathers wanted our country to look like. I think it's going to be the most beautiful space, the most beautiful place that people can exist in. And so I'm excited. I'm excited for our country. I'm excited for finally us to get equality, actual equal. You know, I'm waiting for that thing to happen, and I think we're going to get there. And I think it's going to be hope-filled, and I think it's going to be a beautiful thing.
I cannot wait. I love this book.
Let's
I'm
go.
so glad I got to talk to you, Carlos Whittaker, everybody. Enter Wild is the book. You need to go get it, and make sure you're following him. Lowswit, you can find him on Instagram. That's the best place to check out.
Thank you, Kelly, and I appreciate you so much.
Hey, how's your mama?
She's gold. She's perfect. She's
Dude,
back to 100%.
Okay, ready? 3, 2. I feel like I could talk to you all day. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I know we're running out of time. We are going to continue this conversation on our YouTube channel. So go to YouTube and look for Today in Nashville, and we will continue to talk about this. In the meantime, Carlos Whittaker, thank you so much for joining us. The book is Enter Wild. You can buy it, download it, do all the things right now.